Hey, this is Darren from Property Prosperity. Today I thought I'd have a little chat to you about building contracts. I don't know if anyone's ever built before. I've built lots of houses before, and I'm sure if you have built a house before, you probably start to get a little bit worried when you get to the point of signing a contract with a builder. You start to freak out about all the paperwork and all the documentation required. And so the first thing I'd let you know is basically when you're signing a contract with a builder, it's not just the building contract as such is the agreement you're signing with the builder. There's a whole pile of other documents you're signing. There's probably 6 or more documents you're signing which make up collectively would be the agreement with the builder, which everyone calls the building contract, I suppose. So really, when you're talking about a building contract, you're talking about that the building contract itself is just referring to the paperwork. Hey Gregory, thanks for joining. Is talking about how things are going to get paid. Really, it's all money stuff, I suppose. So what your deposit is going to be, the payment schedule. So how you're going to pay for the house over time. Whether there's any terms and conditions, whether it's subject to finance or whether it's subject to the sale of your house or some other terms and conditions you decide to put in there. Also things that people have to worry about as far as if anything goes wrong, how is that going to be dealt with? Is there some sort of mediation process or what happens? And so that's sort of a legal thing, but more associated with dealing with the money side of things and how things are going to get paid for and how they deal with arguments. The other things you got to understand is so that's just one portion of signing a contract with a builder. The other things are actually what you're actually getting, and that's not really documented within the building contract. The building contract does say how much you're paying for it and when you're going to pay for it, but it doesn't specifically say this is what I'm actually going to get. So the next document you'll be signing off on is something called a building specification. So that's actually referring through to the building code. So it's referring through to how things are going to get constructed and what quality of the workmanship, the quality of the materials. The building code sets out, these are all the minimum standards which are required. So these are the things you need to, they have to do it at the absolute minimum. So again, this doesn't mean it's particularly high standard. This is just the minimum the industry has agreed within itself, which is what they think is acceptable. So understanding some builders will build to a higher standard than that, other builders will build just to the pure minimum. So it's not necessarily the best thing in the world if that's the only thing they're doing, but it's definitely better than builders that are trying to cut corners and not doing things as per required. So that's why you can feel pretty confident that your building has, most builders build to the building code. They understand if they neglect that and they don't build to the building code and something goes wrong, they're 100% liable. Whereas if they build to the building code and something goes wrong, well, they've done their job. They've done everything they needed to do. They fitted within the requirements of the law, I suppose. So they've done their job. So they can't be held liable. So you'll find most builders are going to build within the building code. So that's the building specification. The next document you'll be signing off on is something called a building schedule. So again, it seems like a bit over the top. Why are we getting all this other stuff that they're signing off on? But this is actually breaking down the materials and the workmanship, and similar to the building specification where they're actually documenting the building code and how they're going to be doing things. But this is little bit more detailed, and it's more talking about what the builder's minimum standards are as far as the materials they use. It also point out like the types of windows they're going to use, the types of doorknobs, the types of taps, and but the thing to understand, this is of a pretty general nature. So they will have a building schedule which applies to most of their houses, which is pretty standard. But then on top of that, they'll have another document on top of that, which is actual building quote. So when you go and talk to if you go into a display home, you chat to a sales guy and he sits down, he's taking you through the pricing. He'll probably give you something called a building quote. What that is, it's sort of based a bit on the building schedule, but what they'll be doing is pulling out things which are specific for what you're actually going to have in your house. So, the specific doorknob and the specific tap and, air conditioning and if you're going to have other things like driveways and, all that sort of stuff. So that's a lot more specific. That's included in the building quote. So the building quote is going to take precedence over the building schedules because it's a lot more particular for what you've actually requested from the builder. So understanding that every single one of these documents applies in your particular case. So there is a sort of a hierarchy of importance of documents, which one overrides the other, but they all are important. If you did go to court and you're arguing over things, they are quite important, and you would have signed off on all these documents agreeing to this is how you want your house to be built. So the next thing, building quote, is the building plan. So this is if something's on the building plans and you've signed off this is what you're expecting, whether that's, overhead cupboards or it's a built-in robe, or, you actually be signing off on the building plans themselves to say, this is what I've asked for and this is what I want it to be built like. So this will have all the dimensions and all the size of the house and all the setbacks, how the house is going to fit on the block. And obviously when the builder's signing off on it, they're agreeing they're going to build it in a certain location, a certain size and certain dimensions, and including the built-in robes or not in building the built-in robes. That should be all on the building plans. And likewise, if it is, for example, building built-in robes, there should be in the builder's quote should be a note there saying that they've included the built-in robes. When there's a conflict between the plans and the actual builder's quote, that's when you can obviously have some disagreements. And then it's a matter of trying to determine which document's going to take precedence. Generally, you probably find the builder's quote would take precedence. But again, you're signing off on both documents. They are both important documents to sign off on. Next thing after that is sometimes not, is the engineering you might have, and also council approval plans and all those sort of things. Sometimes you actually sign a building contract with a builder and you don't have all that information. So you haven't had the engineering do the soil tests and all the engineering do the survey plans and all those sort of when they design the footings and they timber framing plans and electrical plans and plumbing plans and all these detailed plans. Some people will bring that to the builders from the start and say, this is what I want you to do, and I want you to quote me up as per this, and this is what I want to get done. In that case, if that's been agreed to prior to signing the contract, that'll form part of the contract, and so the builder's obligated to do what you've requested because you were quite specific on what you wanted. If you sign a contract and you don't have all that detail, basically you are signing a contract and the builder will then prepare all those plans. So it doesn't really make up part of the contract itself. What it will be is, I suppose, a variation to the contract. So things will change after you've signed the contract. The thing to understand, anything that happens after you've signed the contract will be a variation to the contract. Difference between that and doing something prior to that, let's say you're talking to the sales guy for the builder and you want to change the doorknobs from gold to silver. That's fine. He'll just write in the quote, yep, make sure we got gold doorknobs instead of silver doorknobs. So, and he can adjust the price accordingly. And then when you sign off on the contract, that's just agreed and everything's all okay. In the instance where you've actually signed a contract and it's all been agreed up front, and then you change it from gold to silver, he'll actually have to issue you a variation document or a variation form that he'll have to sign off to say, I understand I've signed it off from gold to silver, and you'll have to sign off to acknowledge that you want gold to silver. There'll be a variation in price as well, which you have to sign off on. So the thing about that is, you can imagine that's with one thing. If there's hundreds and hundreds of things changing over the course of the build, that's just going to create a lot of paperwork and a lot of arguments about things that probably could have got sorted out prior to signing the contract. So my advice to people is probably generally try and get as much information signed off prior to signing the contract as possible, and it puts you in a lot more stronger, powerful negotiating position, I suppose, too. And the fact that the agent, the salesperson hasn't actually signed the contract yet, so they're more inclined to throw in things or do better deals before you've signed a contract. Once you've signed a contract and you start making variations, you're going ahead with it anyway. So whatever the variations are, how much more it's going to cost you, you're going to have to sign on it. Basically, you can argue about it, but at the end of the day, you still have to build the house. So that's the next thing is all the engineering plans, all the council approvals, all the other sort of stuff. So you can see there's quite a few documents involved when you're signing a contract with a builder, and so why you can, I can understand why it's quite stressful, and you can imagine this. So because potentially could be hundreds of pages of information you're signing off on there, so it's really easy to miss something. So that's, again, why it's more important than ever, just to make sure you really trust your builder, you trust the information they're giving you is correct. Because you can go through it all, and I'd strongly advise you to go through it all in as much detail as possible and make sure you've covered everything. But there's a good chance you might have missed something. So you really got to hope the builder's going to do the right thing by you and look after you, and just have your interest in mind, I suppose. And if there is something that goes wrong, you really have got to be in a situation where you both negotiate together and try to agree to a common outcome where it works out for everybody. So I suppose that's where trust comes in. It comes into any sort of agreement with any party, I suppose. But in the world of building, you just really got to trust your builder's going to do the right thing by you, I suppose. So just to recap, so we're signing the contract. That's what's going to work out how we're going to, how much we're going to pay and when we're going to pay, and how we negotiate any disagreements along the track. You've got the building specifications, which is more referring back to the building code and making sure we're building within the building code, and will refer to all those different parts of the building code that he's going to build towards. The building schedules, which will actually stipulate the the type and quality of the materials and labour used during the construction of the build. We also got the building quote, which is a more detailed itemisation of what you're actually getting on the house. What else we got? We got the building plans. So the building plans are specifically showing you what you're going to get and all the dimensions, and again, it itemises what's going to be included in the house, but probably in a more visual sense, I suppose, when the building quote or the building specifications and schedules do. And then you've got the really technical documents, which is the engineering plan, the survey plans, the council plans, the plumbing plans, the electrical plans, the timber framing plans, all those different things. They're a bit more technical. Quite often they're not done at the start of the build prior to signing the contract. Quite often they're done after that. But yeah, there's a lot of people get that done beforehand too. So hopefully that's explained to people a little bit more, and hopefully, if you ever get to the point of signing a contract with a builder, you're not freaked out when you see all this paperwork coming your way. If you think someone's about to sign a contract and you think they might find this useful, then click on the share button. I'm sure they might find it interesting. And if you like what I had to say, then click on the like button. If you hadn't liked it, then click on the like button anyway, because I'd still really appreciate it. And if you've got any questions or comments, then feel free to put a comment in the comment box. I can see Gregory was watching on, and he's given me some thumbs up, saying I've given some great advice. And he's obviously agreed with what I've got to say, as far as he's obviously signed a contract before, and he's quite aware of some of the things you've got to look out for. So yeah, if you've got any questions in the future, or if you're something you'd like me to talk about, then feel free to put a comment in the comment box too. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to talking to you guys soon. Thanks, guys.